some of the additional sources that are available.
Awesome, thank you, Stevie.
Hello, my name is Paul Tabioyan. I'm from Yakima, Washington. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm actually a recent energy management student from Central Washington, from their geography department. So I have a lot of interest to see how this data is actually being used. From Yakima, Washington, we have a lot of different issues from the west side, and we are in need of this information to give to our actual local representatives who we are having trouble actually communicating this data to and showing the importance to our communities. So I have a lot of interest to see how this data can really benefit Eastern Washington. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky and Paul.
I can go next. Hi, everybody. My name's Katie. I go by she or her. I'm a community tech fellow for Public Lab working on the Bucket Monitor project. And one of the things that has been kind of true through the course of this project is it's really clear that one thing that people need to consider as they're trying to pull air samples with the bucket is how to match, kind of how to optimize what they're looking for to both kind of expedite the process and understand the results. And so I'm interested in better understanding what sources are out there to help people get a picture of what chemicals are in their air.
Awesome, thank you, Katie.
I can go. I'm Kelsey. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm located in Snohomish, Washington. I'm amazed by how many people here are from Washington. And I'm calling in from EDGE along with a number of other people on this call. We're working on the Environmental Enforcement Watch project, which is using enforcement and compliance history online from EPA to try to understand how communities can better access that data to do more calls for accountability. And I think Malvika and Leslie will probably talk more about that later.
Awesome. I'll go ahead and grab an EDGE link for those that are new to that. I am new to them as well, but I can drop that for people that are more curious.
I can go next. Hi, everybody. My name is Charlie Espedito. These he, him pronouns. I'm calling in from Chicago, Illinois. Currently, I'm running a diversity fellowship on the clean energy side, so really looking forward to learn more to kind of help support my fellows as well, if this might be of interest for them. But also in other parts of my work, I'm doing environmental justice, community support. I'm on the advisory board for a neighborhood group, and we're really always looking for ways to best support local data to the pollutions that are in the area. So yeah, thanks so much for having me here.
I can go. Hi, everyone. My name is Naeem, she, her. I'm calling from New York City. I'm Senior Policy Advisor, Senior Climate Policy Advisor at the New York City Mayor's Office. I joined this call. I'm really interested in this conversation because in New York City, we're working on creating an environmental justice data portal. And something that we're trying to figure out is how to get different data sets to talk to each other. Especially when they're measuring different types of things or use different parameters. So I'm curious to learn about the experience everyone has with that. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Tasia.
I can go next. So hi everyone, my name is Leslie. I use she, her pronouns. I'm calling from Durham, North Carolina, and I'm also part of EDGE. So I'm here with Kelsey and Malvika, and I'm really excited to learn more about how data is used or has been used by Public Lab for environmental justice purposes. So yeah, thank you for having us.
Israel CMCIA, Stephanie Leon Riedel Talsquich. My name is Stephanie Leon Riedel. I work for Sta'alis First Nations. I'm also an enrolled member of Stateless First Nations and living on Stateless First Nations. I was born and raised in Duwamish territory. I am pleased to join you all. My work right now, I have a hard time summarizing it, but we are transferring formal administration of Stateless reserve lands back to the Stateless people, and I'm a part of that process in our territory. Right now we're working on conducting some environmental site assessments to ensure that lands previously managed under the Indian Act are in tip-top shape before transferring them back to Stateless lands. And yeah, I'm interested to hear how these data sets might be applied internationally to Stateless here in Canada. Thanks so much for hosting.
Thank you for that, Stephanie.
I can go. Hi, my name is Adelia Watson. I go by she, her, and I am in Sacramento, California. I'm a UW Doris Duke alum, and I'm kind of getting into scientific communication. So I think data interpretation, especially like public record information, is definitely something I have to get into the swing of evaluating, especially when we talk about climate change. So yeah, I'm just here to hear how we interpret environmental data.
Awesome. And it looks like we're joined by Jackie. Good morning, good afternoon, Jackie.
I guess I can go. I am interested in this topic because we are doing community soil testing with our soil sampling toolkit, and we are in the process of, I would say, we're pretty sure we're going to use the software called FieldScope to start a map with data. So we'll start with our local data, which is, we're in Tonawanda, New York, which is a suburb of Buffalo. But we also have sold our kit to some other community groups across the country. And so our vision is to create a data set of soil testing data on a nationwide scale. So thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for those of you that are sharing. Continue to do so at every time. If you drop off or anything, you can just come right back to the chat. I think we'll go ahead and start segueing so that we can give and center your questions and curiosities today. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, again, this is for Public Lab in our community, which includes all of you. So I'm so excited that you're joining. We are focused on pursuing environmental justice through community science and open technology and tools. That includes environmental monitoring. We also like to raise awareness about health impacts, improve scientific agency, and build new tools and skills so that we can mitigate certain exposures, as many of you are familiar, that impact disproportionately communities across this planet as we live in pandemic with COVID-19. And so that's why I'm so excited for you to be here. OpenHour is one of our events that we host every single month. It's an interactive seminar, so it's not really a lecture, though sometimes it can be, but it's usually an interactive seminar hosted by us and our staff here, both online and in-person events. And for OpenHour, they vary by presentation and like topic, but it's open to you. So on our website at publiclab.org, there is a suggestion for OpenHour topics. So after you go through this event today, if you have anything else that you'd like to see in future months this year, please send them our way. We do really like to focus and center your voices. But really, we like to have you share your lived experiences, tools, and methods around environmental issues and how you're approaching them and how you're using data-based advocacy to really make that shift and change in your communities that you're a part of or that you're working and collaborating with. So this is really a time meant for you to all get to know one another and share those experiences. And then Stevie, do you have anything else you'd like to add? Because I know that you are the senior person here with a lot of the experience with these.
No, that sounds great. Thank you. I'm really excited to hear where everybody's calling in from and this topic.
All right. Well, a lot of you came today because you're probably interested in environmental monitoring and environmental data. I don't really have anything specific that I'd like to center this discussion around, though I would be curious to hear. Some of you started to share it already initially in your introductions, but I'd like to hear from maybe others that haven't had a chance, if you would like, to maybe say what brought you here today. Was it, what kind of curiosities led you, and what are you hoping to learn about?
I can share. I can start off the convo. So as I mentioned, in New York City, we're creating an environmental justice portal, and there is a lot of EJ data out there. So everything from where different infrastructure is cited to what air quality is, or what the water quality is. And it's difficult to try to get them to all speak to each other in a way that is easy to understand, is logical, and then also is designed in a way that can help drive forward policy and inform the communities in a way to equip them to drive forward their advocacy. And so that's something that we're working out right now. So if anyone has experience with that, that's something that I'd be interested in learning more about.
This is Ani Krishnan with the City of Seattle, with the Office of Sustainability and Environment, and this is my first time joining this OpenHour, so thanks for having me. I'm excited to continue to participate. One of the things I wanted to mention to continue your point, Tasfia, about environmental justice is that the City of Seattle has what we call a Race and Social Equity Index, which is sort of this composite index that our Office of Planning and Development put together, and includes a bunch of factors like demographics, race, education, proximity to environmental hazards, and classifies neighborhoods based on that. So if the index is 1, that means that's like a super high priority neighborhood that has many or all of the different considerations in there. And if the index is closer to 0, that means it's not as high a priority. So that's one way in which you can kind of collect all these disparate sources and create, and they're all weighed equally as well. So that's one thing about it. And it's available on our open data website. I'll post that in the chat if folks are interested in checking that out.
Thank you for sharing that, Ani and Tasfia. So we've heard some from cities. Is there anybody maybe that is here as a community member, or you're working grassroots wise as well, that maybe you came today so we can kind of hear across the spectrum of interest?
Yeah, hello, my name is Paul Tabioyan. Once again, I'm from Yakima, Washington, Eastern Washington. We have a lot different situation than most of you, most of the organizations and entities that reside in cities, urban areas, because we are a farming agricultural community. We actually have the divide in the use of data between the community and our political officials, of which we don't have access to because of this rural divide, the methodologies that some of the politicians use for their town hall meetings. And we actually have a situation where our Indian reservation is split. The Yakima Indian Reservation is split in half by 2 different districts, which means one of the largest areas of the state that does have agriculture doesn't have the ability to work with the environmental justice and social justice issues, such as pesticide exposure, some of the immigration issues, because it crosses the 14th and 15th districts. We've had multiple issues trying to get those two districts to act as the same, because they are the tribal lands. But in that, what we've seen is the differences between some of the EPA policies between Yakima and the rural communities, We grow hops here, so we actually emit in this part of the state huge amounts of CO2 directly to the atmosphere just because of the hop process. And that the way they've changed the land use processes here in Eastern Washington, going from apples to hops. So as someone who studies, had recently graduated from Central studying sustainability, environmental management, and environmental issues, I don't see at all where the state is actually looking at the agricultural processes for the requirements of the reduction of greenhouse gases and the reduction in use of pesticides. So that's my direct interest today, is to see, is that data available? Is that data getting into the hands of our regional politicians? And if not, then of course, where can I get that data? How can I obtain that data? And if there's legalities, such as the laws that don't allow you to access farmlands to measure water, runoff, pesticides, things of those natures, if those are an issue, then those also have to be brought to the table, because there are so many layers within this policy that it's very easy to miss one layer that creates a blind spot, that creates externalities and burdens into a community. And after doing modern research, after 20 years of industry experience across multiple industries, what I found was that industries purposefully miss those externalities. They try to push them off into certain other industries, even into communities. And those are the things that we need to identify that will really, that this data will really support change. And that I guess that's the data that I'm looking for, whether it would be hard or easy. But we do have a different situation in Eastern Washington, where we just really have limited to little to no access to our politicians to get this information to. So the more information I have when the time comes, then it'll be that much more powerful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate the point on, I'd like to know a little bit more about this whole idea of open data. Because we're in a situation where we're doing our own soil testing in our community. However, the local university was also doing the same thing, and we've already petitioned them to share their data, and they won't share their data with the community. So it's been a real sticking point for us. And soil data is a little tricky because it's people's property. So we're trying to figure out what would make sense to make it as open as possible without disclosing exactly the exact location, and obviously not the names, you know. So I believe there's a fine line that, you know, we have to tread on, to make it open, but also, you know, not divulge exactly where it was taken. And I know that it can be done. I'm just, you know, I'm in that process of trying to figure that out. So thanks.
Hi, my name's Damaris. Paul, you brought up some really good points, and I'm actually volunteering on the Washington State's Pollinator Health Task Force, and they have a lot of subcommittees. And I'm not on the research subcommittee, but I know that they've identified a bunch of gaps that they would like to get funding to find out about pesticide use. And I am on the pesticide subcommittee, but it's a little frustrating because one of the programs that we could buy into is called Field Watch. It's run by a nonprofit, but one of the people that represents the honeybee keepers claims that honeybee keepers won't buy into the program. So I know there's some tools out there, but it's kind of frustrating to hear the tool that will help us understand what is going on is not being supported, just to even get it started. But I could private message you contact details for the person at Washington State Department of Agriculture that's running the task force, and see if you could get connected we're finishing up some of our meetings soon, but they're going to vote on the recommendations that will be passed on to legislation. And I don't really understand the process of the legislation stuff, but that could be a good thing for you to connect with, because I know we all have questions about where are the bees and what's their health, and we don't have good data. So
thank you so much for sharing that. I also just wanted to read, it looks like we have some community comments that were made. So I'm just going to direct our attention there real quick. It looks like Charlie had resonated with some topics that were mentioned by Jackie, saying, we're facing similar issues, Jackie. We're finding high levels of lead in garden bed soil, I believe in the Chicago, Illinois area, but our campaign is limited in doing outreach to community members due to the liability of reporting the soil levels. And then with that, with some of these comments that are heard, I just wanted to call maybe in the EDGE and Sky Truth community groups that are joining us today. Do you want to go ahead and speak a moment about your programs, just for everyone to hear?
Hi, I'm from EDGE. I'm on the data science team, and we work with this database called the ECHO database, which stands for Enforcement and Compliance Online. It's an EPA website, and it's kind of organized, maybe deliberately, to be very user unfriendly. If you're not an expert with data, it's really hard to navigate. But according to the Community Right to Know Act, this data is legally available to all of us. So what EDGE does is we make the data a lot more accessible. These Jupyter notebooks, by copying the ECHO data and then producing charts and graphs that community members can look at to understand the Clean Water Act, understand the Clean Air Act in their communities and in facilities they work with and things like that.
Went ahead and dropped more resources there about the ECHO data that was just mentioned. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Would you happen to know how that would compare to the Washington State Health Disparities Map?
I don't. Maybe someone else from EDGE could speak on that. We do have quite a few Washington people.
Yeah, recently I'm actually part of an environmental justice task force, which I am on the Washington State Health Disparities Map. Part of the process is to identify how we can have Washington State entities use not only the EPA map that has been used, but also the newly developed Washington State Health Disparities Map, which does use data sets similar. I mean, I would only imagine very similar to what you have. My question would be, where do your actual data sets come from? Do they come from that EPA map? Okay.
Just to add on, the EPA data that we pull, it is the stuff that's on their website, but EPA's online interactive portal only gives you the last 12 quarters, and we're able to pull their data sets going back to the beginning, although it is reported by them to be sketchy pre-2001. So it's a little bit better than that, but probably not topically different. I'll look at that Washington State Health Disparities Map, though. I haven't heard of that, and I'm local.
Yeah, we're in the process of doing another research review of the historical process change. That was one of the biggest questions. You know, when you have something similar to this, businesses and of course policymakers and state employees, organizations can use as they're going through the large project phase to find out, or you know, are we going to actually create burdens in our communities? They realized that they didn't have historical use pattern, so you couldn't actually say, yeah, the map is something to be used in the future because it has shown historical uses in the past. And recently they had a UW study group do some research to help clarify that, and as it goes forward, that historical data will actually become part of the map. So it's interesting to see how the subcommittee had really changed some of the focus on just the subcommittee mapping section to make sure that the data that was actually reaching the map was going to be formatted properly, and of course for future use wouldn't become a casualty of improper data or improper directive of data, which we can say that's pretty much what happened to gerrymandering. If we don't keep ethics and morals at the top of our policy making, that's exactly what could happen to our environmental justice process, is just the same.
I also wanted to just give a moment. I think Rye was not able to join us via audio today at SkyTruth, but maybe if you wanted to drop something in the chat, Rye, for us to read about, learn a little bit more about SkyTruth, we can go ahead and send that resource on to those on the call today. Also wanted just to ask those that are maybe calling in, like Stephanie, I know you are calling in from Canada, or Damaris, I know you have experience in, lived relations in Alaska, and just like thinking about some of these things that are shared and how that these intersections around like open source works for you all and your communities, and also just like maybe challenges that you have with some of these like health disparity maps that are being built by many different groups across the country, and what information and barriers there might be serving for Indigenous community members.
Yeah, I actually have a problem that I'd like to pose to or an idea for an issue that might be solved by Public Lab. I'm Inupiaq from Nome, Alaska, and they're in the rural villages. A lot of the villages don't have running water. It's been an issue for decades. I know the EPA is aware of it, but there's no solution. And I think part of it is an infrastructure problem, but another part of it is funding. The small villages, if they're not aware of what they can do funding-wise, then they don't know how to solve their own problem. And with COVID, it's becoming an issue because I know a lot of the villages, they have a communal location to take a shower, have a bath, wash your clothes. These buildings are called washutariums. So I'm not sure how they can practice social distancing during this time. So yeah, that's a problem that I am aware of in Alaska. And it seems like it shouldn't be an issue in this age, but it is. And I know it's not just a problem in Alaska. Warm Springs is having a problem with their water source. And then the Navajo Nation has also had an issue with not having running water. And part of the problem for the Navajo is the mining company that came and kind of destroyed their water table and made it harder for them to access water. So that's an issue that I would love to see be solved, or start the conversation about how we can fix it.
Thank you for sharing that, Damaris. I know it's something that, for those that are calling in from the Pacific Northwest, we see a lot in the news in a lot of the different communities, whether it be the Yakama Nation. Warm Springs is down and going into Oregon. But all of these are connected to water, which all of us are connected to. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I wasn't able to see any chats yet from SkyTruth. Stevie, do you happen to have a little bit more about them that you could possibly share with the group?
I'm sorry, Ashley. I'm working on it. I'm trying to be quiet because well, my wife is on a phone call, but also my dog is sitting right next to me, and the Amazon delivery folks are here. So it is just, he is tremendously noisy at the moment. But I'll try to make this sort of short and sweet and to the point. So SkyTruth, basically what we do, we're a satellite imagery sort of organization. We use satellite imagery and geospatial data really to empower environmental monitoring and local advocates working on the ground. So it's kind of three big things. One is sort of data journalism. You can see our blog for the kind of stuff that we do, that how we take different data sets and analyze them. The other sort of big part is data engineering. So taking public data sets that are messy or difficult to get into and understand and work with, and trying to reshape those and tinker with them a little bit to make them much more user-friendly and available. And then the third is just sort of generalized public monitoring. So we've built this huge platform. It's called Sky Truth Alerts, and I can share it with the group here a little bit later. But you can essentially sign up for a Sky Truth Alerts account. And what that allows you to do is you go in, you can set up your areas of interest, and then you can receive different alerts. And we're constantly trying to put new data sets into our alerts platform. And those can be oil and gas drilling alerts, mining permit alerts, they can be pollution reports, all those kinds of things. And we're always both trying to put in new data sets and very interested and open-minded to new data sets that would be useful to people. So if there are recommendations for data sets that you'd like us to prioritize putting into alerts, we kind of stuff. But then people can, access those alerts, see what's going on in the place, compare those to satellite imagery. So we've got a pretty regular feed of satellite imagery that goes into the alerts platform. So you can interrogate and investigate those alerts in the context of past and present satellite imagery to kind of see what's going on. If there's some sort of report about an oil spill or a new drilling permit, you can go in and you can investigate that kind of stuff. And the truth is, a lot of our work is perhaps a little oil and gas drilling heavy, because that's sort of our bread and butter, but we're always interested in adding new data sets. So if there are recommendations, and I'm sitting here sort of jotting down a list of all the ones that people are interested in, so that I can talk with our software development team about how many of these can we implement. But please feel free to follow up with me, after the call, if there are data sets that you recommend, or there are data sets that are particularly interesting but difficult to work with, because we have a bunch of geospatial analysts and engineers and the whole range of geospatial nerds that are happy to take on a data set for you.
Awesome, Rai. Thank you so much for that. And so glad that you could be here, and didn't realize you're having challenges. So thank you for doing that short intro. If you all are following in the chat, I dropped a little bit more about Sky Truth and a little bit about what I was talking about. It looks like Martina has also corrected some links that were shared earlier, so just make sure you keep an eye on that. It looks like there was a follow-up question, Katie. Did you want to go ahead and share that?
I wanted to ask, this is pretty far from my area of expertise, but I had been reading a while back about similar, well, I don't know if it's similar, about issues with people along the south border in Texas getting water hookups, which I would assume is a similar, I would assume that there are similar concerns around COVID now. And one of the things that I remember kind of flagging around that instance is that they had said that my question is the funding issue also a land use issue? So one of the things that have been cited in South Texas around people having difficulty getting water hookups is contested title, just around how, kind of running up against the regulatory structure of not necessarily having the right deeds or paperwork. Is that part of what is going on in Nome, or is it strictly a funding issue?
That's a good question. The city of Nome has running water, and for an Alaskan city, its population is pretty big, like 3,500 to 5,000 people. But 70 miles north in the village of Teller, there's around 200 residents. They don't have running water. And I don't think there is a land rights issue because a lot of these villages are Native communities, and they should have village corporations that are managing their resources. But yeah, I don't know if there are small non-Native communities that where we can compare that if they have running water, but the Native villages don't, what is going on? Why do they not? Why is it not? Sorry, I can't think of the word. Like, why is it not important? Why is it still an issue? And I mean, it's infrastructure, it's basic infrastructure that doesn't exist there. I know a lot of the houses are HUD houses, and they are built with the bathtub, and you know, there's a bathroom, but people can't use the bathtub. They just store their gear or whatever, use it as a storage. And then in the home, they have a honey bucket, like a literal bucket lined with a plastic bag. And when they want to dispose it, they carry the bag over to the central location for disposal. And just some villages they deal with everything in a different way. So each village has their own issue of how the waste is disposed. Like some places they don't even have a way to dispose of the sewage. So there's plastic bags full of sewage that is causing pollution. So yeah, I know it's a problem. I don't know exactly what the causes are. If it's scientific, like is it difficult to build pipes? But I don't think that's a problem, because I know I've also lived in Utqiagvik, used to be called Barrow, at the far north, and they have running water. They have running water in Prudhoe Bay. So yeah, I just don't know why it's not fixed. Why is it still a problem? The same thing for people that live farther south. They don't have running water, and I'm not sure why it's still an issue. It really shouldn't be.
I mean, it seems like if it's HUD housing, that there has to be a legal remedy there, because that's a federally administered. I would be interested in learning more about that, just because yeah.
I mean, yeah, it might come down to an issue of advocacy, that they're not connected with the people that can help them fight for the right to running water. I also know, I don't know how people deal with washing their dishes in their homes. Oh, I know that they carry buckets of water home and then heat it up on the stove and wash there. It's a lot of work. And then the same thing in the bathroom in the house. There's just a tub with water, and you're washing your hands in dirty water.
Yeah, and I think that raises for me, just like as someone that knows about these databases but has challenges using them, even with like a limited science background or whatever, going through that academic pathway as a first generation scientist. It's just, I appreciate hearing about like what Sky Truth and others are doing to try to make it more accessible and edgy, about how you're trying to get these databases into the hands of the communities that need them, kind of like what Damaris is sharing. I see a lot of this data and these maps really focused on urban areas, and I think kind of what I'm hearing from folks on the call today is that there's a real need in more like rural community groups, where a lot of the political will may be different than what we're used to in urban dialogues for cities and things, and just like how we can kind of band together and place-based these. Because there's also just like the proximity to space too, just like that a lot of these rural communities are not that far away from urban centers, and so like these tools should be readily accessible. So I just really appreciate you sharing that information, Damaris, and Paul, also for your contributions from like the Eastern Washington side of things. Does anybody else have any? We're kind of coming out on the last 15 minutes of the call today, and I'm just curious, questions you have about using this. Do you have personal experience using this for like an academic project, for like your personal use of like, you're curious about water quality, right? Like Damaris sharing, like in your neighborhood, and did you have barriers, or like were you able to get something but weren't sure what to do with that next step? We have a lot of people on this call that have a lot of shared experience, so it'd be great to hear those.
This is Paul again. I actually, I have a personal interest in water management use. And that comes from one of the research studies that I did as part of my final studies at Central. And it was very specific around irrigation water systems. And as I was pulling the data, what I found was my data came from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Syria, the Nile Valley. And what I was actually searching for was this data that comes from Washington State University, our agricultural school here in Washington. And if it's not being done, that's something that I think at the state level needs one of the highest priorities. One of the things that I really did not find was the data for seepage, soil compositions, evaporation. I didn't even see any of the local colleges who are agricultural based, or at least I couldn't find them through the college engines that I was using, that actually showed me, are there masters and doctoral studies that do specific studies in Washington State about how much water we're wasting. From my calculations that I ran, just out of the Kittitas Valley water system, irrigation system, I estimated that we're literally seeping and evaporating almost 30 to 50% of that water that's in the irrigation system. And just the idea of actually ducting it and turning it into a water utility is a concept that has been used in the country. And to produce power during the summer, obviously, now we're in high heat drought issue already this year in Washington State, but across the country, if we're going to be using water that doesn't have biological issues such as fish, it's not sustaining a fish system, why we can't turn those water systems into powered seasonal, powered generational systems that are modern, that monitor our water, that not only generate power due to the incredible force of the laminar flow of the water, but also at every single use point that comes out of the ground, we can be producing 15 to 20 kilowatts of power. Those are already things that are existing in infrastructure that farmers use in Montana, Iowa, and this is part of the integrated energy management program, is identifying the things that we actually have to create modern systems with the technology that we're using today. My best example is SpaceX. How long has NASA been shooting rockets in the sky, and then we have a new company?
Oh my God, it's just so boring, huh?
Now they're landing rockets, but to utilize that technology to conserve our resources, and that's one of the ideas. I don't see those kind of things coming forward, especially for water, because that is a huge exponential issue for water, fish temperatures, and our actual water volume use as our cities grow. So if that's an item that Project Lab could feed me data or help me obtain data, I think that would be great interest.
I am Boots in Boots.
Hi, everybody. So it looks like since Public Lab is an open space, I apologize for that, Paul. Thanks for your contribution. We sometimes get some Zoom bombers in here, so I apologize for that. Stevie and our team are moderating to make sure that, we're carrying that up and curating. So apologies for that. But thank you for sharing those needs. And, I wanted to go ahead and just say that I know, Charlie, you might have stepped away, but just you shared some use that you've done with some of these databases. If you wanted to share them today, or anybody else, like, I'm a newcomer to a lot of these databases myself. So like, maybe you're like, I have no idea even where to start. It'd be really great to hear some of those stories about maybe steps that you're taking and how we can at Public Lab support you as well.
Yeah, I have a chance to share how I've been able to use the data in my own community. And I'm in Tacoma, Washington, which was noted as the coastal lands of the Puyallup people. A lot of these issues that we're talking about, whether it's water quality, air quality, clean air, all these things are really, as I'm hearing other people talk, it's, they're issues that really impact all of us, and it's neat to see an intersection in a place where we can talk about this type of work. So I guess the work that I have been trying to do is twofold. I work as a planner for the city of Tacoma, but I through that channel have also seen the limitations that exist from that role that I have in the community. I also live in my neighborhood is historically underserved and situated along I-5, which is, like many cities, part of the racist legacy of the freeways. And so communities like mine that were originally removed and burdened with the impacts of the freeway and the air pollution that comes with that and all the issues have been historical in my community, in my city, and like lots of cities, probably where you guys are coming from. And so one of the things that I've learned working for my role within in the local government is, again, some of the challenges that exist in reaching over and connecting some of these groups that are trying to do similar work, but are siloed, and then we're working with communities that don't have access to this data. So all of the work that you guys are doing is awesome. I love it. I'm new to this group, but all the way from the GIS nerds, as somebody said earlier, that's calculating all this data and giving us visualizations to use in our communities is really powerful. And so one of the things that I've done this last couple years now is just on a side, I've been involved in some tree planting projects, and I'm passionate about our urban canopy here and working to restore that. One of the projects we did was at an elementary school that's located along the I-5 corridor, and we had to advocate for the school district and the city to be able to get the trees, to be able to plant them, and then Public Works didn't want to plant them because they thought they would be a health issue, that kids would fall.
Oh, looks like we lost you there, Ricky, on your audio at the last part after the tree plantings. Ricky, I just wanted to go ahead and repeat. It looks like we're not able to hear your audio. It just cut off there the last minute. Okay, so while we wait for Ricky, we'll go ahead and continue to try to get a hold of Ricky in regards to the audio. I'm sorry for all of you that were really engaged in that latter comment and story. There was some comments from, it looks like, Kelsey and maybe Katie in regards to knowing more about databases that people have used already in environmental data monitoring. Is this something that the group would be interested in and learning more about or follow up? And it's something that we could just maybe have end our conversation with, because it seems also like an action item potentially.
Hi, I work with Rye at SkyTruth, and I'm in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And there are a lot of data sets we use at SkyTruth. In addition to Echo, we have incidents from the National Response Center, but I'm new to Public Lab, so what I'm not sure about is how much everyone knows about these publicly available data sets. Like the ESRI site just has a ton of data sets. For West Virginia, I found something as specific as a toxic release data set. So I guess my question is, what is Public Lab doing? Is there a repository that we each can add to? I mean, I could list probably a dozen data sets that I would put in the repository if you had a document that everybody had access to. And I'd be interested in seeing what other people have. So I wonder if that's a follow-up item that we can work on.
That's great. I would love to call in Mimi, and I know you're doing some work right now in moderating, but you've started an excellent resource on Public Lab where people have done just that and contributing existing environmental data onto the wiki. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit as a place where we can collect both the information from this call and things that are already existing.
I
Hi folks, Mimi here. So I've shared in the chat and I'm going to go ahead and share it again. We've started a page on Public Lab. We're just calling that page for now data source. And in here, what we're able to do is collaboratively edit this page as long as you have a profile on publiclab.org. And we're listing different spaces where someone can go and access data, as well as tidbits about what kind of data you might access there. And if you have any helpful tips for how to find what you're looking for in that space. So on that page, you'll find that we've separated this by roughly by types of data. So we have some that are just large governmental data banks. We have water-related data, land-related data, and air-related data as well. There's also a space for satellite or imagery data. And then there is kind of at the very bottom of that page there, some miscellaneous area, which could actually use some organizing if anyone is interested. But yeah, so this is a great space to collect those, as well as this page will collect questions that folks have on data, as long as you use the tag data source there. And there's some more information on that page as well.
Thanks, Mimi. This is Liz Barry. I was wondering if you might also say a little bit about the animated GIF at the top of that page and the Leaflet environmental layers maps and what you can look at in there.
Awesome. So at the very top of that page, you'll see something that's moving. It's a map, it's a GIF. So what this is actually a tool on Public Lab called Leaflet Environmental Layers. I will try and find and share a link to some of the walkthroughs that we have about it. But what this does is it allows you to overlay different types of data on a map of your area. And this is embedded here in Public Lab. And yeah, so if there is a place where you can submit new spaces for data to add to this library. I don't remember, Liz or Stevie, you might have some more details on kind of what the requirements are for this system to be able to read data out of a database, which I don't have off the top of my head. But I will find a link to more information on Leaflet environmental layers there and share that in the chat too. It's a great way to quickly visualize data. It has some ability to do some color mapping, as well as it'll display actual numbers and data points where they're at.
Awesome. Thank you, Mimi. Are you able to just drop that chat, or sorry, in the chat, that link one more time for folks, just so it's fresh, because I know there's been some conversation happening. It also looks like Leslie has, if you want to post any relevant links, you can also drop them on another website resource. Haven't had a chance to check that one out yet, but go ahead and take a look if you'd like. We're coming up on the end of the call today, and I know we've covered like a lot of different case studies and just how people are navigating, but probably you're still left with a lot of like, what can I do next? If you're interested in that, I just wanted to invite you that every single week Public Lab has another event that we call Open Call. And that is really, again, it's a little bit less structured than this, where we have a topic area of focus. But we have them each week for communities to come in. And if you're working on something, you know, whether that be at your workplace, at your school, or, you know, in your community that you're interested, they happen every Tuesday. Tomorrow, the 4th, we have ours at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, because I'm calling in from the Pacific Northwest. So we also have a calendar converter for you on our website. But you can always come in there and drop in any questions for us at Public Lab, and we can direct you to resources that we have in our archives or on our website are happening. It's really just meant to connect people so that you all can start talking with each other about the issues you're facing in environmental justice and climate justice, and other monitoring that you need to work on, because it's always an endless game, as it sounds like we've heard from folks that have a lot of years and experience in industry and community. So again, I just wanted to thank you all for coming, and I'll just leave it open. I'm not going to be jumping off right at 11, but I'm happy to be here to answer any follow-up questions with anybody or curiosities that you have, maybe for the next 5 or 10 minutes after the call. But you're free to go at 11 Pacific Standard Time. So like if you want to go. It looks like we have some resources that are being dropped by community also in the chat. So if you want to grab those, we usually do notes and share them probably within this week. I'll send a follow-up email to those that were invited that maybe heard about this through me, or you can go to our website and just do publiclab.org/openhour, and you'll see our notes and the recording of this talk posted as well. So you can reference those if you're kind of feeling anxious and can't get to all of the chat stuff.
Yeah, also you can find any other open hours that have happened if you go to publiclab.org/openhour-archive, where the notes are stored and the recordings.
I had a general question, just wondering if traditional ecological knowledge is used or stored in any way.
Do you mean on Public Lab or where? Wait, okay. So right now we're the data resources are bringing you to places that are off Public Lab and different sites. So I think, sharing those resources, it'll link you out to places where other data exist. And if that's a place that has traditional TEK, that's amazing, that's great. That's another awesome resource for other people to use. But the data that is existing on Public Lab is data that people bring to the space who are sharing. So if you are sharing your own data, it's a platform for that, but there's not a storage space for that specific kind of data on Public Lab right now, other than what people submit.
I just wanted to thank you all so much for holding space for this this conversation to happen. Been listening in and picking up a lot of interesting things that I haven't come across before in terms of use of data and how it's, I guess, overlaid and what can be extracted from it. I'm currently trying to, as I mentioned before, Stateless First Nation is undergoing a process to comprehensive self-governance. Previously, First Nations were, well, most First Nations, especially in BC, were housed under the federal government and governed according to the Indian Act, and we've been trying to get out of that. So right now I'm building a lands and planning office from scratch, and it's a bit overwhelming. So I will definitely think about joining some of these groups. We do have something similar in Canada that's been really, really helpful for our department, which is an office of 2 right now. So we're having some struggles with capacity building at the moment, but I did drop a link in the comments about a resource that's been really helpful for us here in Canada in terms of building a lands office for our nation, and they have some similar resources, which is why I thought that I would share that in terms of I guess, because obviously a lot of First Nations are struggling with this right now as they're moving towards comprehensive self-governance. It's completely new for everybody. We're kind of on the forefront of that. But having those resources and having a central place for them has been so helpful, and especially one that's First Nation centered. Everybody who works there, they come from that place. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. Also, Damaris, I think it was you that mentioned about traditional ecological knowledge and the Society of Ethnobiology. The last conference I went to, there were tons of presenters that work for their respective communities, First Nations communities that had databases that they were building for their traditional territories. So I think that they keep a record of all their presenters on their website, the Society of Ethnobiology. So if that's something that you're interested in and looking for, my mind was so blown attending that conference. It was so neat. So I just thought I'd share that as well. Maybe I'll drop a link for that also. But yeah, thank you so much for holding space for this. It's kind of interesting but overwhelming to know what the possibilities are. But also that there's resources out there for support. So, hi, Chuck.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And we'll be keeping in touch in regards to how you can all stay involved with Public Lab. Again, just wanted to thank you all that are staying on this last couple of minutes, but I think we'll go ahead and stop the recording and let you go about the rest of your day. And thank you so much again.